Every once in a while, a voice graces the planet that moves like no other. This may be one of the fastest talking, sharpest minds the world has ever seen. We've seen him when he was like a superstar, playing rock stars in movies. He's hilarious, he's funny, he's dynamic, he's gotten himself in all kinds of trouble, but now he's joined the Maha movement, and he's talking about health, and he's talking about the future, and he's talking about authoritarian governments. In fact, it looks like he's covering everything, and I'm about to get into it with him. This is Russell Brand.
Welcome, comedian, actor, radio host, activist.
Talented performer and New York Times best-selling author.
His quick wit, astounding vocabulary, big brain and even bigger hair saw him go on to become one of the top names in stand-up around the world.
My personality doesn't work without fame. Without fame, this haircut just looks like mental illness.
He's, of course, a comedian who's appeared in numerous films, including Getting to the Greek and Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
You're very, very famous.
Yeah, I am for my sins.
That's the thing about me as an actor. I will not pretend to be something I'm not. Ever.
Give it up for Russell Brand, everybody.
I have to say, I am a really big fan of yours.
That's so good. What did you say?
No, I'm never kind. I'm always truthful.
When I was growing up, I thought I'd be a lot happier if I was famous and successful and if I had money. And I think that's because we live in a culture that celebrates fame and commerce and consumerism and money.
The world of celebrity, Katy Perry and Russell Brand were one of the coolest it couples. On Friday, after 14 months of marriage, Brand filed for divorce. What went wrong? Brand, a recovering heroin addict, had reportedly slowed down his partying ways. Perry had not.
I don't look back at the past and get all worked up about it like Ebenezer Scrooge. I simply think those are some things I've done. I've amended for them.
After Hollywood and LA and acting, I came back to London and I started getting involved in media commentary in the UK. I had a YouTube channel.
Are we being cut off from important aspects of reality to keep us conditioned conformists? Hello there, you 5.6 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage towards truth.
What was it, do you think? I mean, there was just something rebellious inside of you, or?
I don't trust authority. In my experience, authority figures have been unreliable. So for me, when people are saying don't do something, I sort of think, well, why? I sort of question authority figures.
You still have that?
Yes.
Well, an article was published in The Guardian yesterday titled Russell Brand's Descent into Conspiracy Politics, how it shows us where politics is heading.
I'm not traditionally what you might regard as a Republican or a Trump supporter. I have arrived on this stage via Hollywood, via liberalism. But I stand before you today because I admire your spirit of freedom and your liberty.
The pandemic created at least 40 new big pharma billionaires. Pharmaceutical corporations like Moderna and Pfizer made $1,000 of profit every second from the COVID-19 vaccine. More than two-thirds of Congress received campaign funding from pharmaceutical companies in the 2020 election.
New friend and honestly a great person and amazing Christian.
In what ways do you think, for lack of a better term, you've been born again?
When you have a baby, it transitions your worldview immediately. It's the end of madness. It's the end of so many things, but the beginning of so many things. It's the beginning of an other-centered life, I suppose is what it is.
To be holy is all there is. To be holy is all there is. And I say that after a lot of attempts at finding other avenues. Now I know Jesus Christ is here.
If you care about democracy, if you care about freedom, if you care about ending war, if you care about your children's health, this is the time for you to do something decisive and different. Stay free. Stay free.
Well, it's my honor and pleasure to be joined by the one, the only Russell Brand.
Thank you, Del Bigtree. Thank you for having me at your studio stroke spa environment.
Yes, I feel a little overdressed. In fact, a little hot. I feel like we should be doing this in a sauna. A little infrared might be good right now.
I'd be happy to go through your wellness routine with you.
Yes, it's one of the things in the morning. I just heard that sweating, one of these doctors, natural doctors, said that like sweating is better than any detoxing chelation process they've ever tried. That sweating in one day does better than most chelation processes do in a month. So I was like, I'm going to start sweating more.
That's really good because I've been doing like a lot of hot yoga. Poor Prince Andrew, He doesn't sweat. You know, that's one of the things he said. He must be in a terrible state. Well, he's just lost his title. You know, like, check this out. I learned just yesterday from, he's called Dr. Jack Kruse.
Yes, Jack Kruse, sure.
It must be someone that you're very familiar with.
Yeah.
About the impact of blue light from screens had grown out of experimentation undertaken by the CIA and FBI that began with mind control, and he's like a legit guy, this isn't crazy conspiracy stuff, that began with stimulating electrodes on monkeys' brains. They realised they could create the same impact with blue screens.
Blue light.
So when a choice is made as to whether your phone screen should be blue or red, they made the choice blue because it makes you more lethargic, apathetic, and more easy to control. So I was thinking that those red light saunas would have the additional benefit of exposure to the red light as well as
the opposite side of the spectrum or something. I think that thing's making me go blind. I used to have perfect eyesight. Now but like on that, how do you deal with whether something's like a conspiracy theory? That, like, do you go with everything that you see? Is it worth the topic? Are you, do you pick and choose, or is there some sort of intuitive sense you have to get with something you're going to interact with?
Still, I have a total fatigue in trying to discern which conspiracy should I believe in, particularly as the sort of independent media and online space continues to fragment, fracture, and turn like Aurora Borealis. Is that what I want to say? Aurora Borealis.
Aurora Borealis, yeah.
Yeah, that's eating its own, a serpent eating its own tail. Like, I increasingly, I'm uncertain as anyone who's using online media and online sources as to what to believe. But I, like any sensible person, immediately ask, cui bono? Who would benefit if this is true? Does this allow regulatory authorities to regulate? Does this allow corporate and commercial authorities to profit? Does this have the ultimate benefit of generating systems of control? If the answer is yes, then whether it's true or not, one can still not tell without corroborated, verifiable evidence. But you do at least know that there's a high likelihood, particularly if it fits within the milieu that I've come to recognise as defining our times: control masked as care, convenience to elicit yet further control. That the bureaucracies of our age indeed mask, and perhaps are the essence of yet, the tyranny of our age. I suppose we still have the hangover of the last century. When I think of despotism and dictators and tyranny and totalitarianism, I think of mustachioed dictators and shiny jackboots and red, white and black flags and Nuremberg and parades and Sturm and Drang. But now totalitarianism comes masked in bureaucracy. Control comes insidiously like a gentle fog under your door, like a warning, we're here to help you. And I suppose I'm alert to that because as a person in recovery from addiction, we of course have to learn about the obvious forms of dependency like drug, alcohol, and then even things like pornography and gambling. But one gets a sense that at the root, or at least more deep than the items I've just listed, is codependency, where relationships become dependent. Now, I believe, of course, as a Christian, that you can only depend on Christ, but the state wants you to depend on the state. And by the state, I mean, the nexus of interest that include global bureaucracies, national governments, corporate and commercial interests. They've become masterful at controlling and centralising information, and the movement of which you are obviously a significant part was a significant breach in their ability to control data. And I think we are now witnessing the reformation of their power. How do they delegitimize information? How do they smear and destroy people that convey true information? And once you know that all they care about is control, because once you have control, you can do what you want. You can profit financially or you can regulate. Then once you've understood that, then things become clearer. So I try not to believe in things just because I want to believe in them, because I've gotten to the point, because of, I suppose, anger, where I want to believe that...
Sure.
That
you have a confirmation bias based on some anger and rage.
Yes.
As does the other side. I mean, it's one of the things that I sort of, we're in such disagreement, we're so divided, but I keep telling myself they're just as passionate about the things they think about the way I see the world as I am about what I think is, control, like the no kings, this no kings thing. Yeah. At first, I kind of had a reaction to it, but then I thought, I don't want kings either. No. Like, I'm totally agreeing with you. Like, no kings. We should never, ever have a king lock us in our house. They shouldn't shut down our schools. They shouldn't force us to wear masks. Wait a minute. Hold on a second.
We didn't mean that, no kings. We don't like Donald Trump. Sorry, it should have been clearer. It's just because calling him a dictator wasn't working, so we thought we'd try kings. But yes, that would mean, hold on a minute, Nancy Pelosi's been in Congress for like 50 years. She's a kind of aristocrat at best and an empress at worst, who went in with a certain amount of resources and power and will be leaving one day, I pray, with hundreds of millions of dollars.
That's amazing.
And that amount.
And meanwhile, taking one of the most beautiful cities in the world and turned it into just
Which one's that?
Well, San Francisco. I mean, you think about that area. You know, I was in Vancouver skiing last winter. I came down and was in a hotel with my family, and I left the keys and the skis and everything in the car. And at the hotel, they're like, "Oh, you don't want to leave your skis in the car and your boots and everything." Vancouver's as bad as San Francisco. And I remember thinking, when did San Francisco get to be the example of a dangerous city to live in? Well, I mean, Nancy Pelosi, I suppose, and Gavin Newsom and these people, this is what this has become. This was the richest city. That was the most expensive city in the world. May still be, but now it's just squalor and drug addicts and boarded up buildings and crime. And so I want to dial in for a second because, you know, you're obviously concerned about authoritarianism, which is one of the things that is fantastic to watch. No one speaks about it better. But were you always in that space, even back when you were, you know, the wilder, partying, having fun? Did you always have a allergic reaction to authoritarianism?
Possibly, Del, because when you look back as you grow older, perhaps, and I pray more mature, you recognise that in a kind of embryonic form were better expressed, hopefully more maturely expressed traits. I have, it seems, a kind of somewhat native mistrust of authority. And that can be difficult, I suppose, because it probably, in my case, includes familial, educational, and all forms of social authority. Just who knows what sociological reasons there could be for that. But I never trusted authority. I've never trusted authority. When I became, like, moved from the circumstances of my youth, which sort of like mundane poverty, not even dramatic poverty, mundane poverty, to celebrity, and, you know, via the gateways of addiction and craziness, into affluence and success and celebration and encouragement and anointing and appointing and becoming a sort of a darling of different little establishments in the citadels of entertainment, I still felt mistrustful. It was a surprising and great day when in LA I met, like, in one day, Larry Charles, the brilliant sort of co-creator and contributor, significant contributor to at least, to sort of Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm and shows like that, and Kevin Smith, the film director, and Peter Bainham, who's a brilliant Welsh comedy writer. And I recognised then, oh, there are brilliant people. It's not just gargoyles and monsters of entertainment. And some of those people were brilliant. Jason Segel and Judd Apatow and Helen Mirren and Alec Baldwin, sort of cool, lovely people. But I started to recognise that it was a comparable sort of lesion on the body of America that's primarily there to promote certain cultural values and ideals and a mindset, and that I was a participant in that, and I didn't really realise how, because one doesn't. If you've craved success or approval for most of your life, and then you get to be in movies and people find you attractive and celebrate you, a little part of your brokenness wants to believe that it's valid and deserved somehow. Sure. But after a while you realise, oh no, the culture can just use me here. I can be used as a sort of a celebrant, an example of, in my case, I suppose, hedonism and individualism and sort of selfishness and decadence and whatever things that I may have represented to other people. So I saw different types of authority and how they operate within different institutions, and of course how they all intersect. The porous nature that you can't have now, sort of moving into your area of expertise, you can't endlessly promote a pharmacological product that's ineffective unless you have a degree of support from the entertainment industry. And then look at when we look back at somewhat recent anomalies, like when Jim Carrey and Jen McCarthy went on, I think, Larry King, and went, our kid took a vaccine, and then our kid was never the same.
As a precautionary measure right now, you remove certain medications off shelves because they're deemed unsafe. Why not vaccines? The American Academy of Pediatrics, I begged and have sat down with and said, why are you not sitting down with our doctors and our scientists who are treating and recovering children with autism? And they refuse to this day to sit down.
If there was any possibility that a child was being helped, that someone would listen, someone would take a look. And the fact is, they're not even considering the information. They're not only not considering, they're discouraging it.
I don't know what happened in 1990. There was no plague that was killing children, that we had to triple the amount of vaccines.
What happened after 1989?
The why did they
It warranted 26 more vaccines.
Agreed.
Are all of them absolutely necessary?
Because they want to make money.
Of course. You should educate yourself. We want to empower parents to educate themselves. Do we need to have the chickenpox? Do we need the hepatitis B shot on the second day of life?
I don't think we can afford to assume that the people who are charged with our public health any longer have our best interests at heart all the time.
And then it's like,
well, yeah.
You know, how do the people that know manage being there? How do the ones that know manage? That's what I wonder.
It's interesting. I don't know if I've ever said this on this show, and I could get into trouble, but I mean, when you reflect back, I worked in Hollywood, I was at CBS, working at Paramount Studios, and, you know, I remember, like, growing up, there's things that I'm questioning now about how we were raised, like, for instance, like the McCarthy trials, right? This idea that this lunatic was going in and calling all these writers and everything communists in Hollywood.
Calling the House Un-American Activities Committee to order.
We're accused of having communists and communist sympathizers in our employ. Undoubtedly, there are such persons in Hollywood, as you will find elsewhere in America. But we neither shield nor defend them. We want them exposed. We are responsible for what goes on the screen. We guard that with great care.
And then, you know, after I moved to Texas, and I'm in the middle of this entire investigation now on vaccines, and I'm really starting to see this deep, dark hole of control and authoritarianism and everything. And then I started watching the television shows that are out right now. There's a spy show, and in the spy show, there's always, I saw myself, and as a spy show's got, some character that's got a podcast, and he's talking about, founding fathers and constitutional rights, and the fact that you should be able to speak up for your independence, and he's a bad guy, like he's dangerous, he's a domestic terrorist. And I was watching more and more and more of these shows. I started thinking about sort of what you were saying, what I was portraying in Hollywood. I didn't realize it, but it's like the Star Trek thing. The good of the many outweighs the good of the single individual. All these things that I thought were beautiful, like this UN concept and all these shows that were doing it. And then I started wondering, was I pushing communism? This idea that we're better when we give up our individual greatness and think more about everybody else. And then I haven't done it yet. I want to revisit, was McCarthy on something? I'm sure someone's going to say, Del, what are you saying? But I don't know what that was about. I only got one-sided version of that, which is this lunatic accused everyone of being communist. But what was I doing in Hollywood that wasn't pushing communism? The entire thing is about, there aren't we don't really want to have single individuals. It's the one that gives up, that it's all about everybody else.
What it is, if you ask me, Del, is desacralized spirituality and I would say Christianity. There is one who gives up everything for everyone else, who's willing to sacrifice himself for everyone else. And the idea that, that the kind of man I would like to be is the kind of man that if any one of you was in trouble, I want to be someone like I'm going to defend them. It doesn't matter about me.
Put myself in harm's way to try and save somebody.
I know that's good. We all know that's good.
Right.
But that's a high value to put other people ahead of yourself. But when you start to talk about it in terms of state-run socialism, who is the broker and brokerage of the ways in which the rights of the many are superior to the rights of the individual? Unless it's going to be Jesus, then you're probably going to get people using that position exploitatively. Because the fact is that communism has some wonderful ideas, shared ownership, because why should we share? Because our rights are all important and we do all matter. But who are you going to give those attributes and that power to? If you strip away the idea that there is a divine and sublime component to reality, and say that all that is real is that which we can measure. You start to rely on institutions in a new way. You can reason your way into totalitarianism. You can reason your way into bureaucracy. As I indicated earlier, I don't now fear mustachioed, charismatic military dictators. I fear quiet bureaucrats edging into my life with total control. I don't think it's a coincidence that C.S. Lewis depicts in the Screw Tape Letters the realm of demons as a kind of vast bureaucracy where through torture and torment and distraction demonic forces control you. You know, the great David Graeber, who was sort of a communist, at very least a socialist American writer, he said that the promise of free market capitalism was always set up in opposition to the kind of bureaucracies that we recognise from Soviet and even Maoist communism. But we're all steeped in bureaucracy. We know that through health and safety, they want control of everything. They're trying to revoke and undo all of the Bill of Rights and constitutional rights in instances where those rights prevent people from being controlled. They mask control as care. So, of course, if we, through our individual sovereignty, choose to live lives of compassion and service, there is no higher calling. But if you do it at the end of a barrel of a gun that's ultimately held by the state, that's not compassion, that's total control and subjugation and submission. They've taught us to be dependent on them, sometimes literally through welfare, certainly ideologically through their cultural artefacts, which we touched upon with Hollywood now, particular roles in the entertainment industry and ancillaries to the entertainment industry. But where we have to get to, I believe, is individual sovereignty under God. That who do you want to give this brokerage to? If you can't get rid of people in Congress, people staying in Congress for decades, it amounts to at least an aristocracy and potentially a monarchy.
I want to drill down a little bit on Jesus since you keep bringing it up. I think one of the darkest things that happened during COVID was the use of Christian values to, that don't, even if you don't do it for yourself, do it for everybody else, right? That if you really care about your neighbor, you need to do this thing, even to the point where there was this idea that Jesus would vaccinate. I was like, really? Jesus touched lepers. Jesus had no fear of anything, and it constantly had this idea that whatever your faith is will make you whole. So I just don't understand it. But to play on this empathy piece that the authoritarians have used, and by the way, Jesus, I think what we forget, is one of the greatest rebels of all time, saying there's only a couple things. I pay you taxes. I'll render under Caesar the things that are Caesar's, but the rest, that's God's, and get out of my face. Yeah. And we forget that rebellious side of Christianity. We only get this sort of group thinkism. Let's all, give up ourselves in it. But my father's a minister, and I, at one point before COVID, years ago, I started saying, I don't feel like the work that you're doing is working. I mean, I get it. I think we should all care about one another. We should, we should love thy neighbor as thyself, all of those things. But the world, we're losing more and more. We're being lied to. Our government's lying. And I just feel like everyone's asleep at the wheel, like God's got this. And we're all, going to be like kumbaya here. And the world's falling apart. Crime's running rampant. And I remember saying to my father, is it possible that maybe at this time in the world, a different philosophy? What if I went out and said to everybody, everyone's lying to you. Your boss is robbing from you. Your politician lied to you. Your wife is cheating on you. Be skeptical about everything because you have fallen asleep at the wheel. And I know you want to love your brother, or know you want to love your neighbor, but you've given up yourself. Do we have to get back to understanding the beauty of ourselves? Because we are, in fact, created in the image and likeness of God, right? We're dynamic, beautiful, powerful individuals. If we forget that, then none of the rest of this matters. How can I love my neighbor if I hate myself? One last thought, I see these bumper stickers that, do unto others if they have them do unto you, which is a great principle. But I want to add on to it, unless you're a masochist. You know what I mean? We live in a world.
Good bumper sticker.
People are upset. They're angry. They hate themselves, right?
That's a really good joke.
Right.
That's a really good joke. Well, unless you're a masochist, yeah, exactly, because you can't presume to know what other people are doing without taking the role of God. Now, what I think you described near the beginning of your last question and diatribe, shall we say?
Yeah, I've been accused of that before.
I enjoyed it though, and me too. is that it is satanic, because what is Satan? Satan, one might say, if you wanted a rational dialectic on what Satan might be, is Satan rejects God's power because he wants supreme power for himself. That's what causes the fall of Satan, to emulate God. What did they do? They wanted absolute power over you. What did they claim? That if you didn't show fealty to their system, that you were being disloyal. What did they use? They used a counterfeit ideology, that your expression of love and compassion and care would be through bowing down, bending the knee, note that metaphor, before their altar of their false gods and their false idols. It's extraordinary too that at the very commencement of the pandemic era, the reason that we were invited to undertake what seemed like pretty draconian social measures, whether it's social distancing, lockdowns, remaining in your home, the dispensation of business or worship or whatever, freedom more broadly, was all undertaken to privilege this vital truth: life is sacred. Life is sacred. But if they really believed that life is sacred, you would feel evidence of that elsewhere in their governance, in their policies, in their planning. You'd see it in their provisions. But they don't treat life as if it's sacred. They treat life as if it's expendable. You can now apply the lessons learned from the COVID crisis to one of the issues de la jour, the migration crisis across the world. Whatever the truth is about what a domestic settled nation's relationship ought be with a migrant population, what I can tell you with some certainty is that the motivations of the state that facilitate migration is not compassion. Because if it was compassion, they would address it at the root. What is the role of imperialism and colonialism from the perspective of a British person in displacing people across the world? And in the case of Americans, what corporate and commercial interests are causing disruptions and overseas? You would address those problems if you cared. You wouldn't wait until, why are people leaving these countries? What is the disruption and disrepair and disrepute? So, I don't, of course, profess to know the answers, but what I do know is that what they claim, we care for you, is actually, we are going to control you. We recognise that we can't control you anymore like that, because you're America, and you're armed, and you're awake, and you're a nation established on the rejection of monarchical authority. But what they will do is tell you continually you're under threat. Since 9/11, I believe, and perhaps a lot longer, like you say, you sometimes want to go back, Del, don't you, and revisit and look at it all through a new lens. It's just been successive, concussive crisis. Because of this crisis, we're going to introduce the Patriot Act and we need to be able to spy on you. Because of this crisis, you need to go into your homes. Because of this economic crisis, we need to bail out the banks and all your homes are going to get foreclosed. Well, who benefits? And you can no longer apply the definition of crisis, because what's a crisis to the majority of people is an opportunity to the most powerful elites and institutions. So what incentive is there for them to not continually induce economic, medical, military crises? It's plain that that's their modality, as they say, not a bug but a feature. The problem they have at least, is now people are awakened, have been trained, in the case of you and me, within those institutions, know how to read information, know how to convey information, and now have access to the machinery of power and production itself. So, if you were still working at CN, you'd be finished. If I was working still within Hollywood, I'd be finished. They sort of, I feel at least, and we'll see after the trial in June, I think, attempted to finish me anyway, regardless, metastasizing my past as a promiscuous womanizer, which is definitely selfish and exploitative and wrong, into something that was criminal. And that only takes a few little tweaks to generate content and material. And in some ways, I'm flattered I'm important enough to warrant that level of attention. But what I think we are living in is a war, a spiritual war ultimately, but also a technological war, as centralized powers realize that the means of production are in the hands of the many, and now people, through skill sets and create a relationship with an audience, which actually amounts to authenticity and integrity, continuing to do stuff even when it costs you, that is a very, very powerful army they've found themselves facing, and I think they're trying to create an arsenal to destroy it. Is that misinformation? Is it malinformation? Can you trust that individual? There's so many tools that are being bureaucratically dispersed now, like Agent Orange, which they told us wasn't bad for us when it was convenient for them to say that.
Yeah. I agree, and I think those tools are failing. I think it's blowing up in their face. I think voices like yours, I've said it. Look, they had a 24-hour-a-day news cycle in COVID. They were pushing like an $11 billion plan to push, their agenda. They hated Robert Kennedy Jr. They hated Donald Trump, and yet those two guys are now sitting in massive positions of power, which says that mainstream media news cycle is failing to deliver the power that they once had. But on this topic, since I've been very focused on vaccines and that issue, did that catch you by surprise? Was the vaccine something that you always were skeptical about, or was this COVID thing the moment you sort of woke up to it?
I didn't see it as a political thing. Like, I feel like I probably had vaccines as a kid or whatever. If that was part of the schedule in Grays, Essex when I was a kid, then I would have had it. And then I remember, traveling to India or whatever, I remember being like, oh, you might need a vaccine or a shot for this or that. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, utility, pragmatism, practice. Then I started to hear, I had a friend of mine whose mum was a nurse, who started to say that when his kids were born 10 years ahead of mine, he was like, oh, I'm not going to be vaccinating my children. I was like, why? And he goes, well, there's some studies that suggest and some people that feel and da-da-da. And I sort of didn't really take it seriously because it wasn't a hot topic. This was before your movie, Vaxxed, and before the Tribeca Film Festival and all of that, what happened when we learned, oh, it's really political, this is political. You're treading on some important toes right there. Well, so when the pandemic happened, it was only our aforementioned, in my forum, we talked about it a moment ago, the fact that I don't automatically trust authority, that meant that I initially, like everyone, thought, oh my God, this pandemic is a unique historical event. This is extraordinary. And when I saw the empty streets in Rome and the hazmat suits in Wuhan.
28 days later, man, this thing's like a movie. It's Armageddon. People are dying, dropping Chinese.
Do you remember all that? All those dead people and stuff. And then because it's the most I can't think of a more illustrative event in human history. That doesn't mean that there isn't one. But the window of the pandemic period showed us what your great George Carlin said: no conspiracy is necessary where interests converge. That it was beneficial to media, it was beneficial to big pharma, it was beneficial to big tech, it was beneficial to the big corporations that stayed open, and injurious to the smaller mum and pop type operations that got annihilated in your country and in mine. It was beneficial to a government that likes to to nationally regulate. Globalist entities like WHO, WEF, Airtal benefited, and it was extraordinary to watch how it sort of swarmed upon us. Now, I, like everyone, most people I guess, at the beginning was like, whoa, this is pretty crazy. Well, what do we do? Have I got to wash my hands? And then a few things happened. High-profile, prominent politicians were kind of caught having parties and attending events. Then there was like a substrata, which you would have been aware of before me, I'm sure, of like Robert Malone or Peter McCulloch, or people saying, this isn't what vaccines do, and this isn't how this works, and this coronavirus has got, what about, do you remember the first time you heard this thing has not come out of a wet market, it's come out of a laboratory? And saying that was like, you might as well have said,
we lost our YouTube channel. We were one of the first ones to
really?
That was like immediately, you are losing your social media channels for saying that. Was crazy, and we had a scientist on saying there's an insert, we can see it, it's man-made, it's right there in the virus, and all of a sudden it's like not allowed to say that.
At that
incredible.
Point, Bill, were you kind of like, oh my God, this is great, people will be so interested to hear this, like innocently, like, hey guys, oh, that's really interesting, Mr. Big Tree. Well, if you'll just come over here, and bam, like you think you're doing, you assume that their sincerity is real at first, because me, it was happening in real time. I'm watching Joe Rogan, I'm learning what you're talking about, I'm watching Secretary Kennedy and learning from him, and I'm like, hey, and then I start to remember, this is that thing where they lied to us the whole time. It's never a lone gunman. It's never to protect you. This war isn't for freedom. This war isn't for democracy. There are no weapons of mass destruction. They don't care about homeless people. They don't care about protecting the vulnerable. All of those things. So what happened with me is like I felt the cogs sort of click into place of, this is what you've always known. You can't trust the government. You can't trust authority. You can't trust the television or the media or the judiciary. You can't trust any of them. Of course, there are human beings, and if those individual human human beings within government or judiciary or media are connected to what I would call God, Jesus Christ, if they're connected, you've got a chance. If not, they're probably going to get controlled by a lesser idol, the kind of false idolatry that means these systems are all booted towards counterfeits and control. These are some of the things that I've observed. So it was this incredibly illustrative period. And like, so when it was like people are getting vaccinated, I didn't get vaccinated. But we hadn't vaccinated our kids, you know, now my kids were already born, or 2 of them. So like I must already have known, I don't know if I trust these people. But it wouldn't have been, you know, I didn't know about spike proteins and mRNA and gain of function. I didn't know about all of that till, you know, the people that were ahead of me started explaining it.
My wife's in yoga. She's bumping into you at Jivamukti in LA and in New York and all these places. You obviously, you know, you talk about meditation. You have a spiritual life. Is there happiness when you lay out that level of I don't want to call it skepticism for all the things around you, the environment, the world that you live in? How do you find peace? Is peace necessary?
Love is real and God is real. God is the God that created nature. God is the God that created you and me. My problem is without realizing it, I was living completely in self. What's very helpful for me to understand my own trajectory, even of what I might call a kind of false spirituality, not making claims about other people's spirituality, by the way, but my own, is that I got ensnared in self-worship. It's very easy to get ensnared in self-worship. All you have to think is what I want or what I'm afraid of are the most important things in the world. And it's really easy to default to that because the culture tells you that's what you should be doing all the time in your identity as a consumer. You're right to mention that it also tells you have to submerge your personal identity for the collective. That is one of the aims and obviously the explicit goals of socialism. But for me, what I felt like was I was in, you know, the addiction is the most helpful way of understanding it, Del, because like as a kid, eating too much chocolate, then as an adolescent, watching too much porn, then when I became attractive enough, attracting females, and I was very interested in females, but in the interim, I'd become chemically dependent on crack and heroin. And when you know dependency on a chemical substance, you really understand dependency in a very literal way, that I'm not okay if I don't have this thing, then you have the thing and you are okay. Then of course, if you're a heroin and crack addict as I was, you have to stop it because your life's going to decline fast and you can't do it on your own. You need help. You need, in fact, God. You need a belief in a higher purpose and a higher principle. So from the brokenness of addiction, there is a route towards salvation, and it is through this narrow crack that the light got in, and it's through that light that I saw the path. And I must be some sort of moron because it took me another 21 years to come to Christ, and it took absolute brokenness to come to Christ. And how that happened, not that you've asked, but you know Christians will tell you, is like that, you know, I got accused of rape and my son was born with, you know, like this is why I'm very grateful indeed to you for the work you do around the health of children and ensuring that the great people that work in medicine have the facility to advocate for a righteous balance between the ingenuity of medicine and pharmacology and the areas where expedience and other incentives might supersede their Hippocratic goals and indeed their oath. Because, you know, when that boy was born and he had to have heart surgery, at the same time that I was in the midst of this sort of personal furore, which obviously aligned very much with my deep shame about the kind of way that I'd lived. Not shame that I'd done anything non-consensual, but shame that I'd exploited selfishly, in my case as a heterosexual, women, because women were really attracted to me and I could sleep with loads and loads of women. And I'm an addict. I've got a lot of appetite. I really, really, really love women to this day. But I'm a married man and I'm chaste and I'm monogamous and I honour my wife. But man, when I was single and in Hollywood and like women are making themselves very available to me, I did not have any discipline or indeed moral or spiritual reason to not get into that. It's only really when finally I was shown, because I'm grateful in a sense to have to deal with these allegations and charges, because now I've been confronted with the consequences of my selfishness, even if it has been metastasized and deceptively altered in order to turn it into something criminal. And I believe that is related specifically specifically to things that happened during the pandemic. I think it's specifically related to the rise of independent media and the decline of ordinary industrial and what we might call mainstream media. I believe there is a correlation that you can't have media reporting on independent media figures as if they've got no skin in the game. Of course, CNN depicts Joe Rogan as being yellow and being a liar. Of course, the BBC have a vested interest in ensuring that independent voices don't rise up that oppose them, that prevent them claiming a levy that amounts to a tax. Of course, corporate and commercial media that ultimately has the same goals as the products that they advertise and ultimately has the same commercial, corporate and conglomerated goals of the sets of institutions that they live alongside. Of course they don't want independent media. They've identified that independent media is the thin end of the wedge, that it begins with people like you going, hey, you might want to ask some more questions about vaccines before you give them to your kids, and it ends with the end of Pfizer's power, then the end of the FDA, then the rise of Secretary Kennedy, and then probably, were this to go unchecked, were they not to smear and destroy independent media and find ways of regulating independent media and absolutely controlling it, for e.g. the way that Barack Obama says, you know, misinformation and malinformation, it affects you even if you are clever enough not to believe it. We're not saying you're stupid, but there are some people who are stupid and we have to have control of this information. The reason is because they know that in the end what it implies is individual and local authority and democracy. In the end, if you pursue the line of where does this technology lead us? Wait a minute, if you can aggregate empty rooms in your house through Airbnb, if you can aggregate taxi cabs through Uber and Ride and Lyft and all those things, couldn't you use the same technology to handle budgets at the most local level? Couldn't you grow food that primarily...
Keep Los Angeles from burning down to the ground and fire hydrants working when we're in a state of crisis?
It annihilates centralisation.
Right.
Ultimately, in the end, you don't need centralised government to the same degree. Of course, there will be a requirement for a military and municipality to some degree, but there's no requirement for the exploitable opportunity of the aristocratic class that have once again presumed control of your country and have never lost control of my country.
When you have kids makes you think about like how are they going to grow up in this world. Do you think about, I want my kids to avoid that wild, rough ride that I went through, but I want to ask you this more pointedly. Are you the Russell Brand that has this voice today if you hadn't gone through that experience, if you hadn't learned through that addiction to drugs just how far and deep it goes? Does it give you an empathy that you can understand humanity better? Was that God's journey for you?
Yeah.
Can you erase that part of a life? Do you want your kids to never mess up or make mistakes? Isn't the prodigal son, isn't the return, is that part of the experience of humanity or is it not?
Yeah.
Can we whitewash it?
You can't whitewash it, can you, Dale? I mean, I was just fascinated to learn that your father's a minister and to note how often you use scriptural language and metaphor in your ordinary, natural discourse. Of course, on one level, I want to, like any father, I want to protect my children from everything, and I would kill and die for them like any father in an instant without thought or reflection. But what I also know is that God has no grandchildren and that God put us in the order he put us in for a reason. I'm there to be Mabel and Peggy and Herbie's father, and please God, if it's your will, more children. I'm there to be a husband to my wife, Laura. And yeah, I want to protect them from the things I experience when it comes to addiction and when it comes to poverty, when it comes to exposure to the harsh realities of life among unawakened people. I want to protect them as best as I can, but I know also that I can't. I know that they're going to experience the world. I know that it's my job to prepare them for the world. I know it's my job to ensure that they grow up clued up. And I can see already that I made mistakes because of my own childhood and my own life and my own, worldview, Weltanschauung. I sort of raised them very much prioritising, don't trust authority, be cynical and suspicious of authority. I default to that. I assume that people want to exploit and abuse. I stay aware to that. It's not cynicism, it's my awareness of fallenness, of brokenness, and of the capture of human systems by darkness, or at least false light. So when I'm dealing with them, I just pray. I see myself mess up every day. I can talk like this while I'm with you on a nice rug in your beautiful studio, but sometimes they annoy me, and I'm like, shut up, you butt. I'm doing it all the time. I'm making mistakes every day with Peggy and Mabel and Herbie, but I know that this is the path that we were supposed to walk. I believe in God, and you know the grace and relief that comes with that. Everything I experienced, that He wanted me to experience. I'm sorry for people that were harmed by my selfishness, but I also know who I am, and I know what I've done and what I've not done. I'm very clear about that. And with my own girls and with my own little boy, I suppose I just want them to be in grace. I would be a liar if I didn't admit that I fantasize almost daily about acquiring some land somewhere and being able to create a community that they would never need to leave, that they could stay in cabins and we would live differently, and one day they will wed and their partners will come here and we'll create community and we'll grow around our own food, and we won't eschew technology like Luddites, but we will do what's necessary and trade only where required and use cryptocurrencies and get out of this system and stop paying taxes to governments that we don't trust, and stop buying food that we know is poisonous, and stop trusting big pharma when we know it's lying to us, and create something that's replicable, and then everyone can do it. That's true democracy, a kind of franchise model. I don't need to be, you wouldn't want me in charge of your world, I wouldn't want you in charge of my world. That's the kind of sovereignty that America kind of has demonstrated and in a way facilitated constitutionally and through the Bill of Rights, but has lost, as your founding fathers said it would, as a result of invasive and ulterior interests, mostly corporate, but sometimes I wonder if it's darker and deeper than that. I just want to participate in the creation of a world that's worthy of God and therefore worthy of them, the part of them that is made in His image. But I'm aware that as a parent, I'm as big a failure as any parent. You know, like my messed up the way my own parents messed up, because I love them so much, and it's agony sometimes, isn't it, to love your children?
Yeah. When you think about the world ahead, is your voice part of the work that you do? You have a huge following, which is fantastic. Probably the most, I was thinking of it like you're like a rap poet. The way the words flow from you is like nothing we've ever seen in this world. Why are you doing it? Do you feel like you can have an effect? Can the world be a better place? Can we get through? Is there anything that can be achieved here? I mean, I ask the same thing. People say, you save millions of lives. Am I? I don't know. I'm expressing myself.
You're doing great.
So what's
Fact
making
is
you
great.
Thank you.
Inconvenient study is great. You're doing what you're called to do. You're being who you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Someone told me, a pastor near where I live now, Brad Good, he told me that saints become who they're meant to be. That's what it is to be a saint. Elsewhere, I read while learning about St. Francis that from nature comes the supernatural. Like it's through nature, through love of nature, through harmony with nature, your own nature and apparently external, but ultimately probably not nature. You become sanctified, you become canonized, you become a saint. So I just want to become who I am. I know I am broken, and I know I am a failure, and I know that I can't achieve grace, that grace is granted to me. The same way as I didn't give myself lungs, I didn't give myself lips or legs, I didn't give myself the ability to communicate with a labial loquacity. It just came to me effortlessly, a gift given to me. Yeah. And I don't feel like I've got any choice, but and when I say I don't feel like I've got any choice, I don't mean that as a idiom or a dictum. I mean, I've never thought about it. Like at first it was all appetite. The same way I didn't think about, oh wow, these women are beautiful. I've just had sex with this woman, but maybe if I have sex with that woman, or maybe if I have sex with that woman, I wonder if these two will have sex with me at the same time. There was no thinking. It was other than the planning of how to maximize. It'd
be hard to think under those circumstances.
It's hard to focus. Dale, if you're having an orgasm every 15 minutes. But it was just my nature. And it takes a lot for me to understand something like sex is sacred, sex is powerful. Don't have sex except within the covenant of marriage. If you have sex with someone, you owe them something. You're connected to them now. Sex is different for a man than from a woman, one might say, in the vast majority of cases. And you are imparting something to them. In Scripture, it says you are connected forever. Well, man, I think of the number of people that I've connected to. I've got I had no doubt have a mission of absolution as a result of my conduct with women. What I resent is the media and government thinking that they're the arbiters. You can't have justice unless you have God. And they are not God. They clearly have, as always, the aims of control and coercion and manipulation. I don't trust no government. Like your man Muhammad Ali, when he went, I think he was still Cassius Clay then, when he refused the draft. I ain't got no beef with the Viet Cong. I ain't got no beef with the Viet. What's this got to do with me? Who are you brokering my life? Right. I think every time if I get a citation for driving a car on the beach, if you do something wrong, if you did something wrong 20 years ago, 30 years ago, justice, absolutely justice. If you did something wrong 50 years ago, there's no statute of limitations on wrong. We are in eternity. We are blessed with the divine. The Spirit is in us. We know that already. We know God is real because you know that through your own consciousness you manipulate matter. You imagine that's the uppermost threshold of that potentiality, that there are not beings that can absolutely control reality through consciousness. The fact that you can't demonstrate that consciousness is ever derived from biological processes is at least a suggestion that consciousness is at least as likely to precede matter as come from it, and that's tantamount to saying God the Creator created the universe and the stars and the earth, and he separated and created the categories and created man in his own image. This is something that you and everyone in the room has as much access to as I do, and what the state is doing through the media is brokeraging that space, controlling it, shutting it off, creating little cisterns of selfish energy instead of the living flow of the holy water that we're here to participate in. So it's very hard to be yourself, Del Bigtree, and you've done a good job to get out of Los Angeles and to create this place here and to pursue your mission and to create films that are unpopular and difficult, and probably people have been killed for doing stuff like that. And when you start really making a difference, it's a fearful business. And for the ones that are, there are people that are in government that we both know and love, and you think, well, I pray for that person's ongoing safety daily, because people that are willing to go up against that kind of power, dark stuff happens.
Let's just finish up with our mutual friend Robert Kennedy Jr. I had the opportunity to be his director of communications while he was running for president. And
that's pretty heavy.
It was pretty amazing. It was a highlight, certainly.
Did you cry at any point? Did you ever find yourself like, oh my God, this is so intense?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I would cry.
Certainly, when you wake up at 6 in the morning and the bear story's out, or things that just he has this wildlife that would come into a presidential run like yours would. If you decided to run for president, I'd be shocked as your communications director. What did Russell do back 20 years ago? What does it matter?
Animals were getting put on roofs. There's a worm in my brain. There's a whale on the roof. There's a bear in the park. What the f are you doing?
But, one of the things you guys share, and I think you've even gone to a meeting together, and it's a huge part of Bobby's life, was the recovery part of his life. And just between you and I, it's one of the things that I think makes him so special for that job is he says he used many of the same words you do, the self-will, and he's had some of the most beautiful speeches about it, overcoming self-will, that, the drug addiction was the only thing he found in his life he had no control over until he found God. He had to hand his life over. And I'll tell you, I've never seen, I don't spend a lot of time around politicians, I've never been that close to something, but it's such a part of his daily experience. I've never, ever seen anyone that, I always say it's like that. It's like there's a dark ghost that sits in the corner, this ghost of addiction or of an ego takeover that at any moment, if you take your eye off it, it can get a hold of you. And he's so clear that it's there. He's never said this to me. It's just my awareness of being around him. But that, even when we'd work on a speech with him where I'd say, and if you would give it this inflection, because I'm a booyah, big speaker, I get people all charged up. You say, Del, I don't do that. That's not, I'm just going to tell people the truth. I have my way of doing it. And I realized that self-aggrandizement, even getting a crowd riled up, can have a charge to it that I always felt like, I started feeling like, oh, he really doesn't even want that to happen. Like, he is here, and he would always just say, God willing, how I do this is going to work out. God willing, if I'm supposed to be president, people want to hear the truth, they will, but I'm not going to go out and charge up audiences and get all riled up. And so, you've had some time around him too. Can can someone on a spiritual journey, which I believe he is, can he have success in a cesspool as deep and as dark as we are witnessing in Washington, D.C.?
With all the cynicism and skepticism that's naturally come to the surface over the course of our conversation, talking about institutional corruption and the kind of subjects that we often share with our communities, it's heartening at last to alight on the subject of Secretary Robert Kennedy, to remember that there are people, men of true integrity and authenticity. I've never been more certain of an individual's integrity than Bobby Kennedy is. I don't claim to know him intimately well, but I know his brokenness and I know his integrity. I know he is real. And I feel that this is the kind of leader that America requires. And in a way, we can learn a great deal from the way that the legacy media treated him. And you obviously must know the ins and outs of all that. In fact, my jaw dropped to watch someone that I respect to say a comic like Stephen Colbert, who I know is a Catholic and I know is a good person, to see the way that he set about Robert Kennedy on his shows. I was like, oh, wow, man, it's real. The mainstream media are going to war against this guy. He's a Kennedy. He's a Democrat. If the Democrat Party weren't so dumb, he would be their leader.
I agree
That's the
with that
leader you have.
completely.
You have Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard, in whichever configuration you want. And the reason they couldn't is because they can't have anti-corporate voices. All they're interested in doing is empty announcements of compassion around subjects like identity politics that don't cost them. But if you ask them to go near the military-industrial complex, you ask them to go near big pharma, media control, actual freedom, they recoil. They recoil. They won't even take responsibility for the ascent of Trump that they participated through Obama in the creation of, not because Americans are racist, but because Obama promised hope and change and delivered neither. He delivered 2008 and mass poverty and house foreclosures and bank bailouts, and demonstrated and continues to demonstrate through the building of his Kubla Khan library that he's in the process of erecting. The word choice deliberate, that you can't rely on or trust these people that seem like they should be the president. Who you need in the case of Trump is a bulwark who's so individualistic and entrepreneurial he can't be controlled in the normal way. And then actually, if someone, a gift like Robert Kennedy, someone who you know because it's in his blood and that blood has been spilled, would die for what he believes in, and what do? They turn on him in the most trivial way, in the most mundane and ugly way. Instead of saying, oh my God, the thing we've prayed for, someone who is injured and wounded, who has overcome, who knows grief and sorrow and pain and addiction and integrity, who has fought against big corporations. You know, if you're all excited to see Joe Biden, God bless him, with his chalky and crumbling wrists saying, we beat Big Pharma, we beat Big Pharma. You're the president. You're the president. The very fact that you're even talking in those terms indicates where real power is. You should be on your knees welcoming Bobby Kennedy, not because he's superior to us, but because he's recognises his own brokenness and he knows what integrity is, and he knows what duty is. And for me, I sort of knew quite early in knowing him that it is a duty to serve him if the opportunity arises. And obviously you must have the same feelings.
I do. Do you have hope?
Yes.
Hope for the future?
Yes. They'll have to kill him to stop him, and I pray they don't.
When you close your eyes on this world in your last day, what do you hope it looks like?
I just want to be with Jesus now, Del, and I think we can be with Jesus while we're here. And I can't be in control anymore. I thought the answer would be to become a big star and have a bunch of sex. And those things have caused me more torment and pain, and have obviously caused other people torment and pain. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the particular situations that I must contend with in the United Kingdom. So I don't want to be in control no more. I've read the instruction manual. I know who is king, and I'm here to serve. And I know I'll forget that by the time I get to the car and start thinking, oh, I'm hungry, I want this, I want that, oh, she's attractive. But I don't belong to myself anymore. I don't belong to myself anymore. I never did. That was the illusion.
From your lips to God's ears, thank you for taking the time.
Nice one,
brother.
Del.
Awesome.
Cheers, man.